you, Isaac.
Can you guys hear us?
Hello.
Okay.
Oh.
We were going to do the Windows 95 dance, but we all argued over who was going to get to be Bill Gates.
Marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, is this thing on? Yes.
Yeah.
My name is Isaac Simpson. I run a creative agency called Will, which you can see here on my hat. We call what we do dissident marketing, but in reality what we do is branding and publicity. So that involves creating brands from the ground up, all the word selling and shape rotating that you have to do to build a brand and to express the brand. But really what we do more than anything is tell brands their reason to be, tell them why they're there and the purpose for being. And I think that's what we do better than some other agencies, or most other agencies. So 6 years ago, I flew up to a dilapidated storefront in the Mission, which was Urbit at the time. And we sat in the backyard, and me and Galen and another guy brainstormed what Urbit was, tried to answer the question, what is Urbit, why does it exist? Of course, we completely failed colossally in answering that question in every single way. But we made a lot of progress in trying to understand the consistencies with Urbit and the consistencies with this community that you see here before you. I think the best way to approach what Urbit is perhaps to think about it as who Urbit is. Who is Urbit? There has been people who are against the system in various ways for a very long time. There have been people who speak against systems forever. There have been people who make art against systems forever. But the idea of making a product or a brand that is against a system is brand new. And that's what's defining our era more and more. Literally dissidence and rebellion via making products, making brands. And I think the thing about making a brand that is genuinely dissident is it can't be made out of the substrate of the system you're fighting against. Hence why Urbit is built from the metal up, because you have to redo everything about it in order to make a genuinely rebellious and dissident brand. Which brings me to the people I have on stage with me today. So these are perfect Urbit people because each one of them has successfully created a genuinely dissident David fighting against a Goliath of a hegemonic industry, a very big and popular hegemonic industry, as you'll see. So we have Daniel Lisi doing it in publishing. He is founder of Foundation Publishing Group, which publishes Passage Press. We heard talk about that yesterday. And we have David Sley, who is founder and CEO of Hestia Tobacco, going up against the absolutely singularly hegemonic tobacco industry. And we have Elena Velez, who's doing this in fashion with her eponymous brand, Elena Velez. So I want to get this started, kicked off by hearing each of them describe the state of the industry that they are assailing. So Elena.
Cool.
What's the state of the fashion industry?
I probably couldn't tell you guys anything about the state of the fashion industry that you couldn't already guess, but obviously it's an institution that's like very tightly curated along the lines of like private wealth and like cultural homogeneity. And to give a little bit of context as to who I am, where I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised. My mother's a ship captain on the Great Lakes. Nobody in my family comes from a business background, so I've had to learn a lot on the fly. And I was lucky enough to get to attend Parsons School of Design in New York, and then also Central St. Martin's in London. And then quickly after graduation, I got a lot of press and a lot of attention for some of the work that I was doing. And over the last 3 years, I've been able to make a name for myself within like the New York Fashion Week scene. I've won the Vogue Fashion Fund, CFDA Emerging Designer of the Year, probably all of the major prizes that come in the fashion industry. And I've been extremely vocal about how difficult it is to make it in this industry without private wealth or without investors who are sympathetic to like creative messaging like this. And so I've been able to really create something unique that is becoming a category king in fashion design right now. And it's exciting, and just working on scaling while also maintaining the integrity of like the creative narrative that I really want to expel.
David, tobacco industry.
The tobacco industry is singularly evil and homogenized. They have partnered with government to stifle all innovation and competition. And I had this idea I've always enjoyed tobacco since I was a kid. And I had this idea of making the apotheosis of smoke, like the actual best cigarette, using the best tobaccos. And I had that idea in 2010. And it took me until last November to finally release a cigarette on the market here in the United States, 12 years. And that was singularly due to the state of the industry working overtime to keep any kind of competition away from their market share. And I feel really lucky and blessed to be able to do what we're doing. And it's a fight. I love it.
It's a battle. Daniel.
Yes. So also a little bit of background on me. I've been working in the book publishing industry for about 12 years, give or take. And similar to these other industry verticals and many creative industries, there's been rampant consolidation across the board. In print media and books, there are effectively 6 companies that determine the global book trade. There's the big 5, which we all may be familiar with, Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster being among them. There's a group called the Bertelsmann Group, which has been around since the 1800s. They own Penguin Random House along with a number of other publishing properties, and they effectively control 30% of the world's book trade. And then there's, of course, the Ingram Group, which is the largest wholesaler of books on the planet. And since 2016, they've also started consolidating every single distributor outside of the Big 5 vertical. And so just in my decade and change of working in books, we've just seen continued consolidation, and as such, continued consolidation on the choices of what gets published and what doesn't get published. And even furthermore, even if there are publishers that make bold decisions to create new catalogs, then what gets distributed? And the gates where these decisions get made have become increasingly narrow, and it has been a big impetus behind the overall project of Passage Publishing and Foundation Publishing Group to figure out an entirely new economy to stand up inside of the book and print media trade.
Yeah, I think consolidation is a great theme to maybe start with. So I'm just wondering are we in a unique period of consolidation for any of these businesses, or has there always been consolidation and it just the face changes of the big, the man, or are we at a greater period of consolidation now, perhaps because we're in a global market, we're all super hyper-connected? Is consolidation easier now, or has it always been this way?
I personally think that we're in a really exciting moment. There's a lot of like disparate but unilateral interests. I don't know. I think that like we have the ability as all of these different satellite enterprises to connect to like a culture and like touch into this zeitgeist that I'm really feeling right now and become something really cohesive and really exciting. But I think it's going to take more than us to facilitate that kind of a change.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I feel like we're all contributing to a scene and a culture that is very promising and like very fruitful. We all connect and collaborate. We share different mutuals. We're all sympathetic to similar ideas. And if we can get our shit together and kind of like join forces, I think that will be really powerful and like instigate the change that we really want to see over the next couple of years as the pendulum shifts in culture.
Yeah, we out-consolidate the consolidators.
Yeah.
In a way.
Well, you said something really interesting to me over a phone call once about how culture is also like politics, a pendulum, and it's been one way for so long, and people are craving something else. And I think that we all kind of cater to that. that craving and that desire in different ways.
Right. So what are you seeing, David? You've talked to me about some really crazy stuff happening in the tobacco world, a public-private consolidation, you might say, of things like the FDA, new laws, and then the actual businesses themselves.
Yeah, I was just going to springboard off that and say that, at least in the specifics of the tobacco industry, the consolidation has been a theme, and I think any time that you have such close connection, as you just alluded to, of private industry and government, it's going to be a breeding ground for consolidation because, I mean, that's essentially fascism at that point. But the Smoot-Hawley Act, the first target of it, the breakup, was American Tobacco, which is, the Duke family, Durham, North Carolina, where I am. That was the first antitrust business that was broken up. And that was in, the early 1900s. And then, of course, like most things that we've seen, the government forces a breakup, and then slowly but surely they homogenize and amalgamate back into each other. So, right now when you walk into your 7-Eleven or wherever you buy your cigarettes, all those different brands are one of two companies. And one of them isn't even, British American Tobacco is now partnered or they own Reynolds. And so that's half, and the other half is Altria, which was a nicer name, they thought, than Philip Morris. But those are the two brands, that's it. And they work hand in glove with the regulatory powers that be to ensure that their market share is protected. And I think that any time that you have that sort of incentivization, you're going to have the same result.
Mm-hmm. Right. And well, especially in the case of tobacco, because it's like the government can do whatever it wants with tobacco and there'll be no outcry because it's like the bad guy. So
absolutely.
Yeah, they can
We're
just
about
milk
to see
it.
that with menthol coming any day now.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of, very difficult. So Daniel, what about you in terms of what you're saying with Bertelsmann and the other company that are really dominant in the space? Is this kind of a new thing, or have books always been like this?
Yeah, I wonder. It's an interesting question about if we're right now in more of a moment of kind of corporate takeover than we've been in the past. I think that we are experiencing the fallout of consolidation that's in the case of books, it's been happening since the 40s. One of my favorite books on book publishing is a book called Book Business, and it's by this historic publisher named Jason Epstein, and he was at Random House when Random House was an indie press, among all these really hip indie Manhattan publishers. And so even before the acquisition by Bertelsmann, he was there when Random House went public. And he talked about how the incentives of what they were doing as publishers completely changed. It went from publishers just being really interested, boots on the ground, taking in the culture, and then producing these magnificent titles that they felt were relevant and spoke to, they were necessarily speaking to the overall cultural unification of this country, to then shareholder interest and just hitting this bottom line. And it completely changed the work culture of things. And so I think that it's just countries, there are ebbs and flows, and sometimes perhaps too much corporate consolidation, you get too big for your britches, and then you just and it's what my personal viewpoint and also the viewpoint of many of my colleagues, they've lost touch. And I think that you've mentioned this before as well, Isaac, when these massive corporations lose touch, their products suffer as a result of it, and then ultimately the reader suffers as a result from it because they just have the same sort of airport bookshelf to select from when they walk into any other store. And so I don't know how sustainable that is, just beyond how immense the structure is, but with that immensity, they also just have to keep shoveling coal into the furnace of things. And then, as to Elena's point, then there's folks like us who emerge where it's we're now gonna make something that is being completely ignored, completely unserviced by the larger structure of things. And it's gonna be way more interesting because we have that agility. You've used, the David and Goliath comparison, and it's very much like that, where it's My colleagues at Penguin Random House, they've compared their operations as like trying to steer a frigate, where it's like you can't, like they can make turns, but it's so incremental and it takes so much time to change course. Whereas you have these new startups that emerge and they are able to make really compelling decisions that then start stealing market share in really significant ways. And perhaps the cycle continues, or perhaps you get like a nice little golden era of new innovation. And I think it is cyclical, like that then perhaps becomes the establishment, new folks come along, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. It's like kind of the ebbs and flows of the academy. The academy gets too big for its britches, and then inevitably, Duchamp comes along and makes fun of them. And then, it goes back and forth, and really it's up to us to that's how culture grows in a good way. So let's talk about what you guys are actually doing with your own brands that is different and cool. So, Elena, I'm really curious, your vision and being from Milwaukee, being not one of these people who has a ton of family connections or whatever to do this, how does that manifest itself in your work?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my central philosophy for the brand is kind of about recontextualizing what's possible for the future of American-made luxury. Like, a lot of my friends growing up were welders and machinists and fabricators, and they all really specialized in blue-collar trades. And so what I'm really passionate about is looking outside of the traditionally established creative coasts to, integrate the rest of the country into the American fashion narrative. And so I've been able to touch on a lot of different liberal zeitgeists that have helped to propel me further. I'm Hispanic, I'm a female, I'm capitalizing on all of these different things. But I think what really resonates with people is this idea of democratizing this space and finding a diversity of perspective. So I've been able to really keep this interesting high-low cross-cultural approach, which is kind of something that you need to be successful in the industry on my level. You have to be palatable, you have to be articulate, you have to be able to be interesting and engaging and articulate yourself in a way that is understandable to the Vogues and the Condé Nast gynocracies, like I call them.
Longhouses.
Yeah. And it's exciting to be kind of part of the space because I'm so excited about some of these ideas and some of these philosophies that I'm experiencing from other writers like Daniel and Lomez. I did a Longhouse Fashion Week for New York Fashion Week, and it was really exciting to get to situate some of these really fringe but interesting cultural commentary in a space like New York Fashion Week.
Yeah.
So, I'm disappointed by the lack of criticism and interest in that kind of a depth of a narrative in that space. But what I'm really excited about is getting to situate a fashion product and a fashion message in an environment that isn't necessarily excited about fashion, but still has a lot of interest in culture, society, and aesthetics in general.
Yeah. So the Longhouse show didn't piss off enough.
It didn't piss off enough.
Well, what the hell?
Yeah.
Well, we'll work on that. But okay, so David, what's the difference with the Hestia tobacco? What are these cigarettes actually? Why are they great?
Yeah, well, they're great because they taste amazing. But most importantly, the first thing that anyone thinks of when they hear about a tobacco company is probably how dishonest the tobacco companies have been throughout the past half century, if not longer. And I guess our radical idea, our dissident narrative is just to be honest, which is crazy in the space, but just make something pure, make something good, and if you choose to enjoy tobacco, we can have the finest version of that. And I think that was just a big tobacco company couldn't create that because that's not their identity.
Yeah, they're so full of shit. They're just out there lying all the time. I mean, you go and you open up the Wall Street Journal on a given day, and there'll be a full-page ad from Altria saying, "We dream of a smoke-free future." Because they're just pandering, I guess. I don't know. And it's just all they do is lie all day. Whereas you've done an incredible job on Twitter being really open. Tell us about some of the Twitter fights you've had. You've had some good Twitter fights.
What was it? The American Center for Science and Health?
Yeah.
That was they called out Magda's article on us and how terrible it was that smoking was being enjoyed again. And of course, it didn't take me very long to Google that this company had been what was it? they had been promoting Agent Orange back in the 60s. They were hired by the asbestos industry to say that that it wasn't actually harmful for a number of years. They're just shills, and so now they're trying. They are THR, tobacco harm reduction, which is vape, and they are promoting that and against everything else. And they went on this whole screed, and it was a one-word response. It was like, yeah, I know, tobacco, like, it's addictive, and you need to be responsible.
Yeah.
And
They also
I believe
showed
that,
their ass. Like, they really, like, showed how humorless and uncool and, like,
Totally.
what histrionic losers they are.
Yeah.
And, like, that's also the mirror that we get to hold to our prospective industries, and that's what makes this fun and, like, kind of, you know.
Well, yeah, it's like they wrote this whole article about how our cigarettes are trying to use sex to sell or something because we have a Matisse-esque drawing that is our logo, and like they clearly had never seen a Matisse, and they just like played their hand. Like, what? Really? Like you're uncultured morons, and you're coming for me. Like, come on.
Big vape came after you. Harm
hilarious.
reduction. Whenever you hear the words harm reduction, you know you should just like leave the room immediately. Yeah. So Daniel, to get you in on this, you know your products. Speaking of Passage, let's just focus on Passage Publishing, Passage Press. I just recently received the latest Passage prize volume, and this book is like beautiful. You had it in your show. It was in the Longhouse
I had both their
show.
products in my show. That's what's so fun about this. We get to, like, cross-pollinate in fun ways.
A lot of cross-pollination. There was Hestia's also. Yeah, so we're all doing this together. But so how did you decide? Tell us about this business model a little bit, because you're doing something really quite different where you're publishing these like gorgeous, almost like printed objects that are going to last the test of time in a first run, and then your second run is more just like the normal paperback. So is that new, or why are you doing that?
Yeah, it's not very new. It's actually quite traditional. So like, again, citing Jason Epstein and like that golden age of book publishing in the 40s, back then when he was at Doubleday, there weren't like trade paperbacks as we know them. You either had extremely fancy editions or you had these really cruddy pulp editions that would like disintegrate in the sun. And so Epstein is actually credited with creating like the first high quality trade paperbacks, which we now see today. But yeah, your markets were either people that were dropping a buck on a pulp novel, or you were servicing universities that would be purchasing these like very finely produced like leather or cloth bound hardbacks. And then in today's book industry, you do have the hardcover that drops first, and then the paperback will follow it like a season or two later. And so we took that model and we were like, oh well, let's go back to the extremely highly produced book and really appeal to the patrician collector. And it's also just a really bringing back a really fun craft element to things, because it's very uncommon nowadays where books get that kind of production service. And so we also just really appreciate the art and beauty of a really fine object. And if you're going to be putting something on your shelf, it better be beautiful. And so the aesthetic approach mixed with, just like the pure business logic of it, where it really does support the overall operations of things, having that release cycle. And then, of course, we still care about like the widely produced paperback versions. But yeah, having that release cycle happen has been, our audiences have, and our readerships have really responded positively to it. And as you've seen, like, they're stunning objects, and it's something that we're very proud of, and it really honors the writer and the trust that is ultimately given to us as publishers. And we're always looking at ways of doing that, because it is like we're being given a lot. We're being given a lot of like writers like bleed their souls onto their pages for years sometimes, in developing these works. And so making sure that it's properly archived, properly developed, and then properly communicated to the readership is something that's pretty important to us.
Yeah, it seems like that making the hard copy version like beautiful and collectible is really something like the big barge, as you were saying, forgot how to do. They forgot that people, I mean, really, in a normal book, the hard copy, the hardcover and the paperback are really not any different.
Pretty
really,
indistinguishable.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas actually making the hardcover like something you want as an object seems like that has to come back because they've forgotten how to do it,
Totally.
basically. Yeah?
Yeah, you can count on one hand the amount of companies that do that kind of production cycle in the United States, big
Right,
time.
like I can't even remember the last time I got like a beautiful book before this. I don't even, So, Davis, tell us about the super trustworthy FDA and all the wonderful things they do for you and your business. I know there's some really interesting facts here that I think are cool to talk about.
So the FDA began controlling the tobacco market. Heretofore, before the FDA, we'd had this thing called the triage of fun, ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the Holy Trinity. And they had regulated tobacco for, I don't know when the ATF actually was formed. I think it was in like the 20s. So it'd been around a long time. And they did what they did seemingly pretty well. But there was a movement after the Master Settlement Agreement, which was all the big tobacco cases, and they all settled in the late 90s to preserve market share. They needed a new thing to make that happen. And so a movement began afoot to hand off tobacco to the FDA, and hence more regulation, more impossibilities of any competition. And every pack you buy, there is baked in about 80 cents that you pay for the FDA to regulate you. It's a user fee per pack. And it's set up in such a way, so, as I mentioned before, it took 12 years from my idea in 2010 to bring this art project into fruition as an actual cigarette company. And the FDA, so I had the idea in 2010, they began regulating cigarettes in 2010, so brilliant timing on my part. And they picked a random date of February 15th, 2007 as the date that if you had a product on the market, you were then grandfathered in. If you did not have a product on the market, you had to go through a pre-market approval, which is the exact same that any new drug has to go through. Now, the I guess, conceit of that whole narrative is that, look, cigarettes aren't a pharmaceutical drug. Like they're a vice that people can responsibly enjoy if they so choose, but there's not any sort of, in no rational world are they going to be able to be held up to the same sort of pre-market authorization that you could hold to Ozempic or some new drug that they've found some glorified thing for.
Yeah.
It just doesn't fit that narrative. It can't, functionally cannot. And so I won't bore anybody here with the whole long story of it, but the bottom line is we found a way through, more or less acquiring a defunct old company, and then we were able to rebrand it as Hestia, and it worked out really, really well. And that was the only way through. I actually had received recipes from prior companies, and I submitted them to the FDA, and I actually had the officers of these companies sign off because they were no longer employed by them, and they probably shouldn't have done it, but they did for me. And the FDA still said, well, no. So it's like there was no rational way through the FDA, which is why we're the only ones that are in this space now able to do this, which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, which is why you haven't seen another cigarette brand in 20 years. So is what you're saying, it sounds like what you're saying, since the FDA took over regulation of tobacco in 2010, there will never be another American tobacco company ever again after that date, after 2007, which is the date.
Unless they change their regulatory approach, and they could. Yeah. There could be political will to, obviously one of my fears is since it took me this long to get through, the powers that be might want to actually loosen the restrictions so that I have an ass load of competitors coming my way in the next year. So that's who knows? Way. That could happen. I haven't heard that, but that's a fear of mine. It took me this long. I'm really happy I'm here. I don't want other people to, Yeah. But It could change. As it is structured right now, no, it won't.
Yeah, the anti-racist cigarette market is going to boom like right after.
Come for me.
Yeah, that's amazing though. I mean, to really think about it, the way that it is now, this is the last cigarette brand that will ever exist in America, unless the laws drastically change. It's kind of amazing to actually think about. But, okay, Elena, and I'll open it up to questions in like 10 minutes, but you have been featured in the New York Times like 1 million times. Telling your story, again, you're kind of riding this edge of like, are you, as you said, you have a lot of things they like, but you're also saying things that are really true and great. So what's your relationship like with the mainstream media, and have you found that to be a boon or negative?
It's kind of, once you achieve the success and like the recognition that I've achieved in this industry, you kind of realize how hollow and superficial all of these institutions really are. Like a profile in Vogue did relatively nothing for me tangibly. A lot of these awards are actually a net negative because they, increase all of these expectations and they put a lot of pressure on really delicate architecture as like a startup founder. So I get incredible press because I think people really recognize a necessity for my language and my tone in the cultural landscape. And
Kanye buy your stuff.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest compliment there is.
Yeah, so I get a lot of front-end success that doesn't always necessarily translate to back-of-house architectural, tangible support, which is frustrating, and also why I feel a need to be constantly vocal because, it's not a LARP. I need support, I need help, I need business partners, I need investors. There's a wide array of people that I need to get to the next level in what I do. And I've already demonstrated that there's a demand and an interest for my language in this space. So now it's really just a matter of growing and scaling and meeting that demand while also maintaining the integrity of what I want to say. And that's very scary for a lot of people that play in the fashion space. It is a very liberal, affluent market. And to have somebody who is as openly, pressing and searching and doing a lot of very, I don't want to say transgressive or but it's a very new language in the fashion industry.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful that at some point very soon I can connect to other players who see the value in that and then also give me the security that I need to take that even further.
So what is the language? I mean, it's the new language. What is that language?
I think it's really, all I can say is that a lot of the fashion industry revolves around the ideas of self-actualization of womanhood, right? I do ready-to-wear, I do women's fashion design, so we're constantly talking about our woman, our girl, and who that is, and where we see her, how she exists out in the world. And for me, something that was very formative experience in that was growing up with my mom, who again, she's a ship captain on the Great Lakes. And when I was young and I wanted to do fashion, she was kind of the archetype of what I expected womanhood to be. And so it was a very disappointing and frustrating fight to get her to be more like the cosmopolitan fashion-loving woman that I wanted to get to know. And so now as I grow older, I have kind of built a brand around this reconciliation of a child's image of beauty and femininity and womanhood with a woman's idea of it, and really bringing back this type of femininity that is assertive and ornery and honest and, makes no excuse for her desires, good and bad. And I guess my girl and the woman that I'm creating in my fashion narrative is a little bit more of a troublemaker and
kind of feral.
Yeah, and it's this difficult narrative to situate in that space because it isn't inherently digestible or commercial, but it's important and
No, I think you
honest,
can feel it. You can feel it from your work. You can feel that feral womanhood kind of vibe, which is really cool. And it's not. What's cool about it is it's not the same as the hear me roar womanhood of that they want you to kind of do, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's actually very well put. He also, talking about the branding and the marketing, you also naked wild tobacco. That's your thing. So also there's kind of a naturalist, vitalist thing there.
Well, we couldn't use the word natural, It was illegal.
Oh, we can't. You can't say natural.
Well, no, naked wild tobacco, and I'm really proud of it, and I think it works really well. But we were sort of forced into that creativity because using common descriptors like pure or natural, you would just think to use, you cannot use.
See?
So that's kind of a funny thing. Sort of necessity is the mother of invention.
Absolutely. And naked and wild tobacco is so much better than just natural,
so.
It's great. Okay, so before we open it up, Daniel, anybody, what are the things that you're seeing marketing-wise, branding-wise, that are really working? This will help people in the room who want to do this. What are the things that, I know that I've heard from clients that, a tweet from a certain person will sell more product than a New York Times article, right? So what are you guys seeing out there? Like, what are the things that are actually moving the needle in the right direction? And what are the things that I think, as you said, like the Vogue article, maybe are a little overrated?
Twitter shit posting. I'm kidding. This goes back to something that David and Elena were saying, where the thing that I see really working is just like making an honest product. Because at the end of the day, you can get a really hot mainstream journal to write about you. Does that convert into sales? Maybe it converts into some type of awareness. But if you make something that's perennial, if you make something that will just continue to last, we've found that our readership has just built month after month with the kind of quality of honesty that we are producing. And like the harm reduction space isn't something was talked about a moment ago, but this culture of safetyism when it comes to distributing any sort of cultural product. It puts it through these layers of these people might get mad, this might offend somebody, this might cause a problem on Twitter or something. And the response to it, I feel has been a type of lying. And I think the culture at large, we're tired of being lied to. There's no trust in institutions. There's no trust in any sort of legacy media as it stands, because people have this rightfully informed suspicion that it's gone through this process of defanging any form of honesty toward it. And so just making it known that you're not being lied to, this is what this is. Have at it. I feel that has been what has really informed the brand, and ultimately creates more and more of a readership around our catalogs.
Yeah, it's all the lies, you're right. It's just the big ships have gotten so self-owned into just lying all the time about everything they're doing, And
it speaks back to the corporate interest side of things, where it's just the boardroom has forgotten what they're actually meant to be doing, besides just trying to pump and extract cash from their audiences. And it's an out of touch feeling. And so they're willing to obfuscate and create fake things just to keep it going. It's absurd.
Yeah, it's every beer ad is drink responsibly, It's why don't they just say, get smashed on this, we want you to get drunk on it. And that's why it's everybody's brains are so damaged, because we're just being lied to in our faces 1,000 times a day by these giant companies. And that's why what you guys are doing is so, it's really a righteous battle in a way. Any more thoughts on marketing before I open it up to?
I think it's easy to be David. It's hard to be a David of Galician height. So I'm curious to see how we'll be able to maintain this purity and integrity of messaging as we scale to the next level. And I think I keep bringing this back to the necessity for support. It really comes down to, if you see value in what we do, support us. Invest, buy the product, collaborate with us, sponsor us. Wear the Longhouse royalty hat.
We have one here. Okay. Yeah. Any questions from the audience for anybody here?
Yeah, enthusiasm.
Okay. Yes. Well, I think we got a thing here.
Thank you, Gabby. Thanks for breaking the ice.
That's what I do best. So all three of you, your companies rely so heavily on aesthetics. Like aesthetics are so important to what you do. And how much do you think aesthetics play into kind of moving this pendulum you speak of, and like how alluring that can be for people, as opposed to maybe the more heavier ideology that people can get lost in? But like, how can aesthetics like move us over? What do you think?
Beauty and quality is like the easiest vehicle that everyone responds to. You know, it's like that's what we all want at surface level. And this is what I try to do with what I create, is like there's a percentage of the demographic that's like actually interested in the narrative and the storytelling and the background, which is great. And then there's another part of the demographic that just wants a pretty thing. And like you should be able to communicate to both of those people because they're valid for different reasons. And I think that maybe that's also something that you guys find value in as well. Like, it's a good cigarette, great, period.
But if you're not making something beautiful and excellent, why are you wasting your time?
Yeah, exactly.
No matter what the market is or industry, it better be fucking beautiful and excellent, or else it's a waste of time.
And it's unsustainable.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking in the same vein, like beauty and quality means care. And so like if you get something that's high quality and beautifully made, the end person that gets that, they're like, oh, like someone gave a fuck. Like this is, and that is translated through just effort and aesthetics. That someone just took the time to make something gorgeous. And like, again, speaking to David's brand, speaking to Hestia, like it's such an easy and obvious thing to market because it's like top leaf tobacco. It's good stuff. Like no vinyl acetate in the cigarettes. You're not smoking plastic. You know, it's just like obvious measures of quality that took a lot of time and research. And it's just like, and people understand that. That's the best messaging for sure.
You totally passed your crash course in
Thank
cigarette.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that does actually bring us back to Urbit, which what does everybody always say about the Urbit code? It's beautiful. You know, that's what engineers always say when you look at it and it's so natural. It's the most beautiful code you've ever seen. So, follow-up question though, why do the big systems, why do the hegemonic players seem to be increasingly optimizing for ugliness?
They can't afford it. They can't afford beauty.
I think they just don't care.
They don't need to care, yeah.
Right, they don't need to care because they have an ossified market where they own 100% of it. So who gives a fuck about branding when people are going to buy your shit anyway?
Yeah. It does seem like they're promoting it though. You know, like the billboards with the,
I think it's just laziness. Like it is just like, because like the larger companies are like, again with like the frigate thing, like they're not creating anything new, especially visually. So they're just like kind of seeing trends that are happening on the outside, and then they're co-opting it like 6 months, a year too late. So then they just pump out something that looks like everything that has happened in the last like year or two of what it's trying to emulate, because they're not agile enough, and they're not creating these new modes of communication. They're just trying to like emulate what they think is hot at a moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone on stage here is making these beautiful products, but they're sort of niche, and they mostly are appealing to a particular audience, like the people in this room. And I have a hunch that when we talk about scaling into this next phase, like a lot of that will happen organically. But my question is for Isaac, from a marketing perspective, what is the appropriate way, and maybe it's different for each product and at any given moment, but how do you take something like this that's built on aesthetics, that's built on beauty, that's built on refined things that may have a sort of limited broad appeal, and sort of penetrate into the mainstream?
Well, I mean, beauty should penetrate into the mainstream on its own, right? I think that's kind of what people are saying. If you make something, I won't say who said this, but there's a great quote, if you put a weak horse next to a strong horse and ask people which they prefer, they will always pick the strong horse. So I think that's what I always tell my clients, right? I mean, my clients come to me, and a lot of them have spent ungodly amounts of money on mainstream branding that tells them to look like every other brand, right? So on our website, we have a big poster that says, never apologize.
And this is like, I'm like a psychotherapist for my clients, just telling them, it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to be yourself. Just be the most beautiful version of yourself. You want to be negative? Be negative. You want to be, super alpha male? Like, go for it. You want to be super not alpha male? Go for it. But just be yourself. Like, the culture of the company has to emanate from the insides of the founder. And if you can do that beautifully, I genuinely believe people will just gravitate to it naturally. So I don't think you really do need to do work to penetrate the mainstream. I think it'll get there, and people, the more we put our flag out, the more we put our signal out, that's all we have to do. I think once you start considering what the mainstream wants, you're fucked.
Right.
Because then you're going to destroy your own brand because some idiot is, afraid of what, in my industry, the biggest thing that people who went to marketing school say is never be negative. Never write anything negative on a piece of paper. Yet if you look at the great taglines in history, the great brands, many of them are negative. I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I drink Dos Equis. Trying to get that through a longhouse agency, they would be like, what do you mean you don't like beer? Like, this is a beer company. You can't say that about beer. So it's like, you just got to be yourself. And I think that being yourself, that is beautiful, And I think that's what we should be pushing to do. Is just to be the most pure, distilled, beautiful version of whatever you're trying to create, which is what these guys are obviously doing incredibly well. So,
when can we expect Hestia snuff?
He said, when can we expect Hestia snuff?
Well, that would be a whole other FDA licensing nightmare. So it'll be a minute.
Are you familiar with Khat? K-H-A-T?
No.
Is that like the extreme, like, if I'm remembering correctly, like it's used in like ayahuasca ceremonies, like it's like the like super tobacco?
More like Taliban.
Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah, not going to get in the COT game anytime soon. There's no COT brands, though. It seems like there's a white space there. I don't know. Anything else? Any other questions for anybody? Yeah, we got Tushar over there.
Elena, you mentioned cross-pollination. Did that come about organically, or are you guys like being pushed by some billionaire? I'm kidding.
Well, I think what I really love about what I get to do is I get to be a pipeline to the industry for other non-traditional creatives, right? Especially ones that are pioneers in this philosophy of the brand that I'm trying to create, right? So like I get to go home to Milwaukee and I collaborate with these artisans and these makers who specialize in all these blue-collar crafts. And then I bring that to New York and sell it back to the people that have all of this geographical condescension towards the Midwest. And I think that's kind of cool. And so we've expanded that. And now I have a collaborator studio where I take open applications from all sorts of different people to connect and collaborate with the brands and co-create products across all of these different verticals to be able to show at Fashion Week. And that's something that I'm really, really passionate about. I think it's kind of punk and it's interesting and it really inverts this idea of the fashion collab. And it's really, really fun and rewarding to get to collaborate with like Passage Press and like Hestia and like bring them into this universe and situate their product and their ideology in front of a consumer base that is just completely, awestruck.
If there are any billionaires in the audience, though, we'll drop a safe for you. Elena's looking for partners.
I'm looking for partners, investors. I need a business partner, too. Like, I am so exhausted. Please help me.
Okay. Any more questions from the audience? Anybody? No. Okay. Good. All right. Let's wrap up with final closing remarks. So, where are you now and where would you like to be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm really excited about the possibility of becoming like vertical and scalable and creating a maker space that turns into a factory of sorts in the Midwest. And like for sentimental reasons, I wanted to do that in Milwaukee because I think it really reinforces the narrative of the brand, but like more realistically, probably like a Chicago or something. And so what I want to do is like make the back end process of creating products in America as sexy and as commodifiable as the fashion itself. And I think it's really exciting to get to work with, the local prospects, but also turn it into a very high-end, vehicle. And I have those sorts of connections, I have those relationships, I have those opportunities at bat to be able to bring this to fruition. So, that's one of the initiatives that I'm really excited about over the next couple of seasons.
It's pretty basic on my end. I just want everyone who enjoys tobacco to have a Hestia. Wonder I get a time.
Have a
Love
Hestia.
Yeah, right now we have years of catalog ahead of us, which is something that I'm in a really privileged position with that. We are standing up a new distributor, which speaks to that consolidation that we're looking to combat against. So that's something I'm particularly excited about, is not just publishing our catalogs, but also then helping other publishers circulate their books, their catalogs to a global trade. And that's something that I'm just like constantly thrilled about, and constantly thrilled about the vehicle of publishing. It's just the people you meet and the stories that you get to learn about. And so I'm really, really happy with where we're at in the process of this project. And yeah, I'm very excited for the coming years.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here. If you want a more beautiful world, don't just talk about it or tweet about it. You have to spend your money, vote with your wallet in these types of organizations, these types of projects, because we're still allowed to start companies. We can't really say what we want anymore, but we can certainly make beautiful things and have people pay for them. So I think that's it.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
All.